There comes a strange moment in life when people think they've figured you out, not because they truly know you, not because they've sat inside your silence, or felt the weight you carried when nobody was clapping, or watched the private battles you fought just to remain soft in a world that kept giving you reasons to harden. They think they know you because they've seen a version of you long enough to make a conclusion. Maybe they saw you quiet for too long. Maybe they saw you lose momentum. Maybe they watched you step back, fall behind, start over, change direction, disappear into yourself for a season, and they quietly decided, maybe this is as far as they'll go. And honestly, maybe there were days when you almost believed them, because waiting can do something strange to the human spirit. It can make even the strongest person wonder whether the dream was real or whether it was just some beautiful thing the mind created to survive disappointment. You keep showing up, keep learning, keep healing, keep trying to become more honest with yourself, and still the outside world looks almost the same. Same room, same problems, same people assuming the same things, same silence after all that inner effort. And somewhere in that space between what you feel inside and what life is showing outside, doubt starts whispering, not loudly, just enough to make you look at your own reflection and ask, what if they were right about me? But listen closely. People can only measure what they can see. They can measure your results, your money, your status, your speed, your mistakes, your pauses, your visible progress. They can measure whether your life looks impressive from the outside. What they can't measure is the force forming underneath all of that. They can't measure the wisdom that came from being humbled. They can't measure the discipline built in lonely seasons. They can't measure the quiet strength that develops when you have no audience, no proof, no applause, and still refuse to betray the deeper feeling that you were made for more. So while they were watching the surface, something else was happening. Something they had no language for, something you barely had language for. You weren't finished, you were being formed. Sometimes life doesn't push you forward because forward would be too small. That sounds strange at first, because most people are trained to believe movement always means progress. If things are growing, improving, expanding, then life must be working. If things slow down, if doors close, if energy disappears from places that once excited you, then something must be wrong. Maybe you lost your edge. Maybe you missed your chance. Maybe other people were right when they told you to be realistic. But life doesn't always prepare you through movement. Sometimes it prepares you through stillness. Not comfortable stillness. Not the peaceful kind where everything makes sense and you feel wise and centered. More like the stillness of a bow being pulled back so far that the arrow might think it's being taken away from the target. You may have been in that kind of season. A season where people kept moving, posting, winning, announcing, becoming, while you were dealing with things that didn't look like success at all. Inner confusion, emotional exhaustion, a weird distance from the person you used to be. The old goals losing their flavor, the old identity feeling too tight, like clothes from another life. Maybe you tried to explain it to someone and heard yourself sounding dramatic, so you stopped explaining. You just carried it. You went quiet, and people, being people, filled the silence with their own conclusions. They thought your quiet meant defeat. They thought your pause meant weakness. They thought your lack of visible movement meant nothing was happening. But a seed underground doesn't look busy either. No one passing over the soil says, "Look at all that becoming." They just see dirt, maybe a dry patch, maybe nothing worth noticing. Yet under the surface, something is breaking open. The shell is splitting. Roots are searching. A hidden intelligence is doing its work in a place where sunlight can't reach yet. And that's the part people misunderstand about you. Your slow season wasn't empty. It was not wasted time. It was not proof that your life had stalled. It was the private breaking open that had to happen before anything real could rise. A shallow version of you could have moved faster, sure. It could have chased approval, accepted a smaller dream, performed confidence while quietly feeling hollow. But the deeper version of you couldn't do that anymore. So life pulled you back, not to punish you, to make sure the next version of you wouldn't be built on sand. There is a kind of preparation that feels almost unfair while you're inside it. You lose things before you understand why they had to leave. You outgrow people before you're ready to be alone. You become tired of pretending before you know how to live without the mask. And for a while, it looks messy. It doesn't look like destiny. It looks like confusion. It looks like falling behind. It looks like being passed by. But some transformations can't happen under bright lights. They need privacy. They need pressure. They need the kind of darkness where you finally stop performing and start listening. Not listening to the noise of what everyone expects from you, but listening to the quieter voice underneath, the one that says, "You're not here to repeat the life they imagined for you." And once that voice becomes clear, something begins to shift. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic movie scene way where everything suddenly changes and music starts playing in the background. Real change is usually more subtle at first. You stop craving approval from people who never understood your depth. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing rooms where your spirit has to shrink just to be tolerated. A strange calm begins to appear, not because life is easy, but because the old version of you is losing authority. The one who begged to be seen, the one who overgave, the one who tried to prove worth to people who were never qualified to define it. That version starts fading, and as it fades, the person underneath, the real one, the one they never truly met, starts getting ready to stand up. Pressure has a way of revealing what a person is made of, but it also has a way of creating what wasn't there before. Think of a piece of metal in a fire. At first, the fire looks destructive. It burns, bends, strips, weakens the old shape. Anyone watching too early might say the metal is being ruined, but a blacksmith knows better. Heat is not the enemy of the blade. Heat is the condition that makes reshaping possible. Without it, the metal stays stubborn, fixed, unable to become sharper than its original form. Your life may have done something similar to you. It placed you in heat you didn't ask for. It put you through pressure you didn't understand. It let people underestimate you while you were still molten, still forming, still too deep in the process to show them what was being made. And that's painful. Let's not make it sound prettier than it was. Being underestimated hurts, especially when it comes from people who should have seen more in you. A stranger doubting you is one thing, but when it's family, friends, old partners, colleagues, people who watched you struggle and quietly lowered their expectations, it lands differently. It makes you feel like your becoming is invisible, like your entire inner life is happening behind a locked door, while everyone outside is judging the hallway. They don't see the nights you had to talk yourself out of giving up. They don't see the mornings when you woke up tired, but still chose not to become bitter. They don't see the discipline it took to keep your heart alive. And maybe that's the part that needs to be said clearly. Surviving without becoming cruel is growth. Healing without needing revenge is growth. Continuing to believe in your life when the evidence is late is growth. Not every victory arrives with noise. Some of the most important victories happen so quietly that even you don't notice them at first. One day, the same insult doesn't reach as deep. One day, the same person tries to pull you back into the old dynamic, and something in you simply doesn't respond. One day, you realize you don't want what you used to beg for, not because you're numb, because you're free. Those are not small moments. Those are signs that the pressure has changed your structure. The old hooks have nothing to grab onto. The old fears don't command you the same way. The old need to be chosen, praised, understood, rescued. It begins to loosen. And when a person no longer needs the world to confirm them, they become very difficult to control. That's when people start saying you've changed, but what they really mean is, you no longer fit inside the role they were comfortable assigning you. Here's where things get interesting. The qualities you used to hide begin returning, not gently either. The confidence you softened so nobody would call you arrogant. The creativity you watered down so it wouldn't make people uncomfortable. The intelligence you kept casual because being fully seen felt risky. The leadership you avoided because you didn't want to be judged. The voice you lowered. The standards you compromised. The vision you pretended was just an idea when deep down it felt like a calling. all of it starts coming back, but not in the immature form it had years ago. Life seasoned it, pain deepened it, silence gave it weight. What returns is not ego, it's not performance, it's not look at me. It's more grounded than that. More dangerous too, in the best way. It's the calm authority of someone who has finally stopped apologizing for having a soul with size. And naturally, the world around you starts reacting. At first, it may not be applause. Sometimes people resist your growth before they respect it. They may question the new boundaries. They may joke about your ambition. They may act confused when you stop being available for the same conversations, the same habits, the same low ceilings. Let them be confused. Their confusion is not your assignment. When a person has only known your winter, spring can look suspicious. They might think you're pretending. They might think you're going through a phase. They might wait for you to return to the version of you that made them feel safe. But something has shifted too deeply now. You can't unknow your own strength. You can't unfeel the dignity that came from surviving the dark. You can't go back to being small just because smallness made other people comfortable. And honestly, why would you? Why return to a room you had to shrink to enter? Why keep explaining your depth to people committed to shallow measurements? Why keep treating their expectations like a ceiling when they were only ever a mirror of what they could imagine? Their imagination is not your limit. Their doubt is not a prophecy. Their silence is not a verdict. You are allowed to outgrow the story they wrote for you. You are allowed to become so aligned with your real self that the old predictions collapse under the weight of your presence. Not because you're trying to prove them wrong, that's still giving them too much power. You're going to exceed every expectation they had of you because the person they judged was not the final version. It was the version under construction. Now something powerful happens when your energy stops being scattered across too many versions of yourself. Before real inner alignment, a person can spend years trying to be everything to everyone. Strong in one room, easygoing in another. Silent around people who can't handle honesty. Funny when they're actually tired. Productive when they're spiritually empty. Available when their body is begging for rest. Ambitious in public, afraid in private. It becomes exhausting, doesn't it? Like trying to keep 10 candles lit in a storm. So much energy goes into managing perception that very little remains for actual creation. And then people wonder why their life won't move. But the soul can't fully rise while it's divided against itself. Eventually, the division becomes too expensive. You reach a point where pretending costs more than changing. Where staying in the old identity drains more energy than stepping into the truth, where the mask feels heavier than the face underneath. And once you reach that point, you don't need to force transformation anymore. Something in you simply refuses to keep lying, not in a dramatic way, more like a tired honesty. A deep, almost physical knowing that says, no, not this anymore. Not that relationship pattern, not that fake humility, not that watered down dream. Not that habit of making yourself digestible for people who never even tried to understand the full meal of who you are. And when that refusal becomes clean, life begins to respond. You'll notice small things first. A conversation that lands at the perfect time. A random sentence that answers a question you were too afraid to ask out loud. A door opening through someone you didn't expect. A delay that protects you. A rejection that redirects you. A book. A message, a dream, a sudden memory, a strange coincidence that feels less like luck and more like a quiet nod from life itself. Now, of course, don't become the person who sees a divine sign in every parking space. Stay grounded, pay your bills, drink water, answer your emails. But also don't be so realistic that you become blind to the way life speaks when you're finally listening. There is a kind of timing that begins to appear when you stop fighting yourself. The world doesn't become perfect, it becomes more precise. Maybe that's what alignment really is. Not life giving you everything instantly, not some magical shortcut around effort, more like walking into a crowded train station and after years of missing your platform, suddenly hearing the announcement clearly. Same station, same noise, same trains, but now you know where to stand. You know what to ignore. You know which doors are not yours even if everyone else is rushing toward them. That kind of clarity changes everything, because once you're not chasing what belongs to your old self, the things meant for your real self can finally find you. Opportunities stop feeling like something you have to beg for. They begin to feel like something you're finally able to recognize. And yes, people will notice. They may not understand it at first. They'll see the external changes and call them sudden, but nothing about this was sudden. They'll see the confidence and think it came out of nowhere, not knowing it was earned in rooms where you had to rebuild your faith piece by piece. They'll see the success, the glow, the clarity, the way your presence fills space differently, and they'll reach for familiar explanations. Luck, timing, new connections, maybe even arrogance. Let them reach. People often explain transformation in ways that protect them from having to admit they missed the depth of the process. It's easier to call your rise sudden than to acknowledge they overlooked the years you spent becoming. But you won't need them to understand. That's one of the clearest signs that the old chapter is closing. You won't need the apology. You won't need the shocked expression. You won't need the, "I always knew you had it in you," especially from people who didn't speak life into you when you were still buried. Not because you're bitter. Bitterness is still attachment. You'll simply be too focused on the life opening in front of you to keep staring backward at the people who misread your silence. Their expectations were built from incomplete information. They saw the pause, not the preparation. They saw the quiet, not the gathering force. They saw the empty field, not the roots. And soon, when the surface finally breaks, they won't be able to unsee what was there all along.